How's it going? Ryan here at eTrailer.com. Today on our 2017 Nissan Frontier, we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install the Firestone Air Command 1 air compressor. So the air compressor is going to serve a few different purposes for us. One being, since we have a gauge, we're going to be able to monitor the amount of air pressure that's in our bags. And it's also going to make maintaining our airbags, since they do require a minimum air pressure, a lot easier. We can simply just flip our switch from inside of the cab here and do it that way. We're not going to have to worry about going to the gas station, to an air compressor, getting out of the truck and filling them up. And that's also going to make adjustments very easy from right here inside of the cab, because every now and again we are going to have to change the pressures, especially if you haul multiple trailers that weigh a different amount. You're going to be able to fine-tune your bags from right here inside of the cab to find that perfect, comfortable ride. Now what I really like about this one, in comparison to some of the other styles available, like the wireless ones for example, is how simple this is and how easy it is to use. You know, it's not going to go anywhere. It's always going to be right here, very easy to see, and again, easy to use. You're just going to have your gauge, allow you to monitor that pressure, and our switch, which will allow you to either inflate your bags or deflate them. And even at nighttime, we're not going to have a hard time seeing what's going on with our airbags, because there is a light in it that we hook up to our headlight switch. That way when we turn our headlights on, our gauge is going to illuminate. So overall, a really straightforward, easy to use compressor system that's going to allow us to maintain and fill up and deflate our bags from right here inside of the truck. Whether we're at the job site or away from home and not around an air compressor, we know we're going to be able to get the job done, keep our truck nice and level, take that wear and tear off our suspension, and maintain that factory ride. Now as far as the installation goes, there's a handful of components, a little bit of wiring and airline tubing that we're going to have to run, but it is relatively straightforward, and it will take a little bit of time, but as long as you stay patient, you're going to be able to get the job done. Speaking of which, let's go ahead and do that together now. To begin our installation, we're first going to start by mounting some of our major components. The first one being the compressor itself. And so we're going to be working right here on the driver's side near the firewall next to our vacuum brake booster. So here's where I mounted the compressor. Now it is a little tight in this area, but I chose this location because it's going to ensure us that our compressor is up out of harm's way, and it's going to provide us with a really clean look. Now, you don't have to mount it here, but this is the area that I did. Now I mounted it by simply setting it down onto the body of the truck and drilling 4 holes and using the provided screws to secure it to the body. And there's going to be 2 fasteners on each side of our compressor. To give us more room and access to the mounting hardware for our compressor, I did remove our wheel well liner. Now this is really straightforward. There's going to be a handful of Phillips head screws along the edge of it. And once you remove all those fasteners, you're able to just pull this right out. And here's what the bottom of our hardware looks like that's holding our compressor in place. Now we can mount our air filter. Now the way this works is it simply just pushes into a hole to keep it in place. So what I did right here along the side of our engine compartment, I just drilled a hole and then was able to just push that and snap it in. And then I moved on and mounted up our relay. And I just used a self-tapping screw to secure it to the body of our vehicle. And I mounted it with the wiring facing towards the back of the truck or towards the firewall. That way we can run it along the firewall and it'll provide us with a nice clean look. Now we can run our airline from our filter here to the compressor. So what I did was cut off about a 2-foot piece of tubing, and one end of the tubing simply slides on to the barbed fitting here on the back of the air filter, and then I ran it towards the compressor. And when you do this, you want to make sure to put a loop in the line. That way any condensation or anything like that will build up in there. Then I ran our airline tubing underneath our ABS module here, and it comes out right here in this area. That way we're able to plug it into our compressor. And when we plug it into our compressor, it's going to be the same thing as our filter more or less. There's just going to be a barb fitting coming out of the back of the compressor, and that's where we plug it in. Now just a quick tech tip, if you are having a little bit of trouble pushing that nylon air tubing over those barb fittings, one thing you can do is get some really hot water and put the end of your tubing in it for a few minutes to help make it more malleable and a little softer. And then you're able to more easily slide over that barb fitting. Now we can focus on our wiring here underneath the hood. So we'll first start with our 2 wires coming out of the back of the compressor. We're gonna have a red wire and a black wire. The black wire is a ground, so I just ran that up along here and grounded it to the body of our vehicle right underneath our relay using a self-tapping screw. The red wire, I ran it up, and this is actually going to plug in to the orange wire that's coming off of our relay. Now these have pre-attached spade connectors, so when you plug that red wire from the compressor into the orange wire from the relay, it's really straightforward. You simply just clip the two together. Now the thick red wire that's coming out of our relay, that's going to run all the way over to our battery. And the path that I took to get there is just along our firewall on top of this factory wiring. And I just kind of dropped it down along our fuse box cover here. Secured some of that extra wiring along the way using some zip ties. Then ran it over to here. Now that wire does have a pre-attached fuse right here, and I secured that just on our power steering fluid reservoir bracket. There was already a hole drilled in it from the factory, and so I just got a nut and a bolt and just secured it that way. So eventually this end of the wire will get attached to the positive side of our battery. We're not going to hook that up just yet. We're going to wait till we have everything complete and do this last. Now there is going to be an additional wire that I ran from our fuse block to the inside of the cab of our truck, and that wire is going to give us power for our gauge. That way, whenever we turn our headlights on, that gauge light will come on. That way we can see what our pressure is at night. So what I did was just lift up our fuse cover, and I located our headlight fuse, which is right here, and what I did was just use a fuse tap to tap into it. Now the fuse tap is not included, but if you need one you can find it here at eTrailer.com. So then what I did was just use a butt connector to connect an additional length of wire, and then just ran it along that same path as our thick red power wire all the way across the firewall back to where our compressor is located. Now since we are going to have to run some airline tubing and some wiring into the cab of the truck, we did have to locate a spot to do that. Well, in this case, on the bottom grommet rather, that's actually there from the factory. So you can just pop that out and open it up and run some wires through. Now since that bottom factory grommet is a little tight and we have a handful of wires and airline tubing to run through, to give us a little more room and for a little bit of a cleaner look, I added another grommet. So I just drilled a hole right on top of it and used a rubber grommet to put in place. That way we'll have some more room. Now as far as the wires go that we have to run inside of the cab through our grommets, we're going to have two. We're going to have this wire here, and this is the one that we ran from our fuse block that'll go to our gauge light. The other one will be this white wire, which comes right out of the relay, and those are the only two wires that we're going to have to feed through the grommets. Now we're going to have two air lines that we need to run inside of the cab. The first one will plug into our compressor here, and we're going to use about a 6-foot piece. So once we have that piece cut, we'll plug it into the compressor and simply run it through one of our grommets. The other air line will be the large bundle of air line that's going to run all the way to the back by our airbags. So we're just going to run maybe 4 or 5 foot of one end of it through our other grommet. Now we're here on the inside of the cab of our truck, and this is just to give you a good idea of what all of our wiring and airline tubing will look like running from the engine compartment to the inside. Now with everything inside of the cab, we need to run it over to where we're going to mount our gauge. And here's the path that I took. I just used a couple of zip ties along the way to secure everything, and this is going to go to our center console. So to get everything to drop down through where we need it, I did have to drill a hole in the bottom of this plastic. That way everything can come down and be really easy to work with. So now we can kind of prep our gauge cluster here. That way it'll make it a little easier to hook up. So what I first did was take the bottom black wire on our light bulb, as well as the white wire on the back of our switch, the one that is vertical, closest to the edge. And I cut those wires and connected the two together using a butt connector. Then the other end of that butt connector, I used some additional wiring and ran that out back up through that hole that we drilled where all of our other wiring is going through. That way we can find a good spot to ground it somewhere underneath the dash. Now as far as the other thing we need to do is the top wire coming out of our light. That's going to be for power. So what I did is just pre-attached a butt connector, and this is going to get connected to that wire that we ran from underneath our fuse block. So now we can start connecting everything. We'll first start with the power wire for our light. We're going to connect it to our wire that we ran from our fuse block. To do that, just take the other end of our wire, slide it into our butt connector, and crimp it down. What I like to do is just kind of lightly pull on the two ends to make sure it's completely secure. Now we can take the other white wire that comes from the back of our switch, and on the end of it, it's going to have a pre-attached spade terminal. Now this is simply going to plug into the other side of the spade terminal. Now this is the white wire that is running from the relay underneath the hood. So these two will simply just connect into each other. So now I went ahead and hooked up one of our air lines, which is right here. Now this is the line that's coming from the back of our compressor. This is going to go to that barb fitting on the back of our switch. Now the other air line here, this is the one that goes to the back of our vehicle, which is going to tap into our airbags. That's going to get connected to this barb fitting. So I'm going to go ahead and use a couple self-tapping screws to secure our gauge pod to our dash. I went ahead and used another self-tapping screw on the other side, and this is what it looks like once it's completely secured. Now that last ground wire coming from the back of our gauge light, right here is where I grounded it using a ring terminal. Now this is the airline tube that we connected to the back of our gauge, and we're going to run it to the back of our truck by our airbags. This is the path that I took. Just ran it down along our firewall. It actually is tucked in behind this little heat shield here from the factory. And that line actually runs behind this factory heat shield because we want to avoid any hot or moving parts. And you just keep following it back along some factory wiring on top of our frame rail. Just use some zip ties to keep it nice and secure. And then this will just follow this same path. It's a little tricky to see because our gas tank is here. Here's where it comes out from our gas tank. And then what I did was just zip tied it, and this is our extra tubing. So we're going to have more than enough to find a good spot where we want to put our T-fitting and connect it to our airbags. Okay, so again, here's our length of wire running up front. to our gauge. This one here is for our driver's side airbag. And this end here is for our passenger side airbag. So what we need to do is take our included T-fitting and figure out where we want to connect all three. Now I'm going to go right here in this area above our gas tank. Now when we cut our airlines to length, we want to make sure that it's a really straight, clean cut. We don't want to just use a pair of regular old-fashioned snips. You either want to use a tubing cutter, a really sharp razor blade, or a tool similar to this. So I'll go ahead and make that cut. I'm going to look over it really nice to make sure it is where you want it to be. We're going to repeat that same process to shorten up all of our airlines to length. But this is a perfect example of what your airline tube should look like with a nice, clean, straight cut. So I went ahead and plugged in a couple of our airlines to our T-fitting. The single one in the center here, that's to the airline running up to our gauge and compressor. On this side, that's where our driver's side airbag line runs. And this is the passenger side. Now when you plug these in, you just line them up with the fitting. You want to push all the way down and then lightly pull back to make sure it's completely seated. So now back underneath the hood, we can hook up our positive battery wire that we left undone. So if you just kind of lift up on this cap, pull it back, it'll expose a few battery studs. The one that we're going to connect to is this one right here. So go ahead and loosen that up with a 10mm socket. Set that nut aside. And if we just peel off that insulation, we're going to take a ring terminal. Now this isn't the one that comes with the kit. The one that comes with the kit is a little bit smaller, and you'll have a tough time fitting it over at that post. If you need some larger ones, you can find them here at eTrailer. So we'll slide that on, crimp it down, and simply just put it over that stud and tighten the nut back down. Once that's tight, just take your cap and put it back in place. Now with everything hooked up, we can test it to make sure it's working properly. So right off the bat, first thing we're going to check is our gauge light to make sure it illuminates. So we clip our headlights on, you can see it lights up, and we know we're good there. Now if we push up on our lever, the compressor should kick on and start filling our bags up. So we can see our needle gaining pressure, so we know it's filling our bags up. So what I'm going to do is put about 30-35 psi in them. That way we can go underneath the truck and check for leaks at our fittings. Now here underneath the truck, I went ahead and sprayed down our T-fitting with some soapy water. What we're looking for is bubbles to be rapidly forming. And if that is happening, that's going to indicate to us that we have a leak. And what we need to do, if that is the case, is pull our line back out, make a nice, clean, straight cut again, plug it back in, and try it again. In our case, everything looks sealed because we don't have any bubbles forming. And that'll finish up our look at and our installation of the Firestone Air Command 1 air compressor on our 2017 Nissan Frontier.